Hey guys, this is Tony, and today we're going to be talking about kind of iffy, controversial topic. And if you haven't read by the title already, I'm going to explain it again. What's with the Simpsons hate? What I'm basically talking about is the hate people have for the Simpsons today. And I'm talking about this in the type of people that have been fans of the show since the 90s, ones that have watched it for probably 10 years at least, who now say, oh, the show is dead and it's basically being a dead horse. Many fans bring up 3 reasons why they hate the show now than they do back then. Now, there's a different type of fan, too, we need to consider. This is just the normal set-type fans, the ones who enjoyed it in the 90s and kind of grew out of it. And then there are people like me who have been longtime fans, and I've actually been watching the show for almost 10 years now. So I really enjoy it. I've seen the old episodes, I watched the more recent ones. I'm just going to get that out of the way. I've seen both sets. I laugh my ass off. So the 3 reasons that many people bring up is, the first one is longevity. Many people just said, well, the show was good to a point, and now it just feels like someone's beating it like a dead horse. Well, you've got to consider that it's kind of never been heard of that a show's lasted almost 30 years. I mean, you've had shows that have been on television for 15, 20 years, some lasting, hell, a good 10. That's even rare half the time. But for a show to last almost 30 years, basically 3 decades, 2 generations, that's astounding, and it's kind of funny. Now, when people bring this up, I'm surprised they never bring up Family Guy, which has been on the air for 14 seasons, and how that show has turned out. No one brings up South Park, even though South Park is still very crisp and is very topical. It's very kind of current. It still knows what it's doing. And I'm not saying The Simpsons don't. I'm saying South Park is kind of more on the ball than The Simpsons are, but that's because South Park literally animates their show in a week. The Simpsons, it takes 9 months, so we'll get more into that subject a little later. So, yeah, it's funny they don't bring those shows up. You don't bring up shows like Friends, you don't bring up shows like Frasier, Cheers. Those are shows that, I can tell literally they've had dry spots. And, The Simpsons, yeah, I will admit, had a dry spot. For me, that dry spot was seasons 17, 18, and 19. So, yeah, the first 16 seasons were good. And then 17, 18, 19 were just meh. And then, 20 onward has been just, it's kind of just growing itself back up. So, yeah, that's one reason that I hear many people bring up. It's just the longevity. The second reason is the plots have been recycled. Now, this is another thing where I have to bring up. For a show that's been on the air for a very long time, yeah, eventually this problem will come up. Look at SpongeBob. They've literally been recycling plots since season 6. And they're on their 9th season and they're recycling plots. So, what you gotta understand is, again, these shows take 9 months to produce. Again, it's the same thing with SpongeBob. But with The Simpsons, it's kind of hard to really, do a new story without at least kind of combing over an old one. And the problem is, when you set a show with a dysfunctional family, or you set a show with a family archetype, it will kind of, restrict itself to a certain degree. But because, The Simpsons were smart and also focused on the side characters, also focused on just, the characters in general, it kind of knew how to break itself out of that mold. Now, this is something like that happened with the Flintstones, too. The Flintstones kind of did the same thing, but the Flintstones went way over the top and way ridiculous back in the 60s, as the Simpsons kind of haven't done it in at least the last 10, 20 years. So, yeah, the writing, you gotta understand, the show's been on the air for so long, eventually this will happen to most shows. Eventually they will recycle a plot, or they will bring up something that happened probably 10 years ago and do a new episode based on it. SpongeBob's done it, South Park has done it once or twice. It's just gonna happen. And finally, the final theory that many people have, or the final statement they have, is it's just not as funny as it once was. That kind of happens because pop culture, you got to understand, pop culture changes. When The Simpsons debuted, it was the most controversial thing on television, along with Married with Children. Those are the two most controversial shows, coincidentally on the same network, by the way. So, as the years kind of went on, there became more and more controversial shows. You know, you had South Park, you had Beavis and Butthead, you had Family Guy, you had Futurama, you had Archer, you had King of the Hill. All these shows, and I'm listing all the animated shows, but all those shows kind of came and kind of just blew whatever The Simpsons kind of had controversially out of the water. You know, you had, Always Sunny in Philadelphia. You had The League. You have, You're the Worst. Those are, by the way, great shows. But those completely now blow whatever The Simpsons controversially did 25 years ago out of the water. So I just think it was a change in pop culture. And again, you got to remember, they do these episodes in 9 months. So for them to do it in 9 months means that they have to make sure that the pop culture kind of stays somewhat the same by the time the show goes on the air from the time they produce it. And that can sometimes just be a problem, and so they have to go back and change something very quickly and try to at least make it a little more topical. Again, this is kind of why South Park does every episode in a week, so they can answer it a lot more directly than shows like The Simpsons or Family Guy could ever do that. So, I have a personal theory as to why I think many people have started to despise the show. And I think it's just because the style of comedy has definitely changed. If you really think about it, think about comedy back in the 90s. Think about comedy back in the late 80s, early 90s. You had Jerry Seinfeld, you had David Letterman, you had Married with Children. Those were considered comedy. You had The Cosby Show. And so again, as the entire decade moved on, as you moved on through the 90s with South Park, Beavis and Butthead, and Family Guy, Duckman, all that, and moved into the 2000s with Malcolm Middle and all that stuff, you can definitely sense a change. So I think it's not that the show hasn't gotten funny, it's that our deception of humor has definitely changed in 25 years. Than, kind of, our humor now is way different from our humor back 25 years ago. I think we've gotten a lot more darker and a lot more black with our humor. And with that said, guys, to kind of end off this review, or this little, editorial discussion, I'm going to kind of list off my favorite episode of The Simpsons and my favorite season of The Simpsons. My favorite episode of The Simpsons is The City of New York versus Homer Simpson. From season 9. It's my favorite episode because, as someone who kind of wanted to go to New York, and I've been wanting to go for years, watching an episode in which Homer and the family kind of get stuck in New York and have to deal with kind of the New Yorkian things, it's really funny, especially seeing Homer kind of stuck at the World Trade Center. That's really funny. And Bart visiting Matt is one of my favorite scenes of all time. My favorite season of The Simpsons, and this might be really controversial, or it might be, just very opinion, if that's even a word, season 11. Now, what you gotta understand is many fans claim that the show was good seasons 2 to season 9. Season 1, they say, is kind of weird. So, anything past season 10 onward, they claim is horrible. But there is another group that says, oh, it's seasons 1 to 13 that are good, or, oh, it's seasons 1 to 15 that are good. So, with me, it's seasons 1 to 16, and then 20 onward. So, with that said, season 11 is my favorite because it had the most jokes. It had some of the best episodes that I got to watch, especially in syndication. They're some of my favorites. And it just, I don't know, it just felt like it wanted to be more of a cartoon. And I think that is one of the funniest things to ever think about, is a sitcom that wants to be a cartoon. So, with that said, guys, yeah, my favorite episode, my favorite season. The Simpsons is still my favorite show of all time. The second best show I probably would consider is South Park. And there's actually one more, but I'm going to talk about that one in the future. So with that said, guys, this is Tony signing out. And, ciao!